Hello everyone, this is Fish and Rice Stories from Japan. I'm Toby.
I'm Andri.
And today we welcome a new guest, Chari. Thank you very much for coming. You're here with us today to talk a little bit about your experience as a transgender and non-binary person in Japan and how this has worked out for you. But before we dive into this, I want to hear a bit from you. Who are you, where are you from, and how long have you been here in Japan?
My name is Chalice, but I usually go by Chari because it's easy for people here to remember. It's actually slang for bicycle. I can't ride a bike.
Oh.
And I'm from the US. I'm from Alabama. I escaped.
You escaped.
I've been living in Osaka for almost 5 years now.
Oh, so we arrived around the same time, 2018?
Oh, really? Yeah, it was around then. I don't remember now.
I'm almost 6 years, so a little bit longer than you.
Yeah.
17, I think.
Yeah.
End of 17.
What brought you to Osaka?
I've always been interested in Japan, and I came over with one of those teaching programs that just places you somewhere. And
The JET program?
Yeah, it was a JET. So I got stuck here, and I ended up really liking it. So actually, I have a sister, an older sister who lives in Tokyo. So I'd been to Japan several times before I decided to move, and I was like, I'm gonna live in Tokyo. I'm gonna live near my sister, and we're gonna have such a great time. We're gonna go to karaoke all the time. It's gonna be great. And then I got placed in Osaka, and I was like, oh no, I love it. So so I'm here now.
Did you have like any specific expectations or dreams when you were coming to Japan, or did you just want like a change of scenery from Alabama?
I don't know if I really had many dreams. I just have always enjoyed a lot about the culture, about the language. I'd been studying Japanese for several years. And I'm also into things like cosplay and
awesome.
some other stuff. That's how I met one of your previous guests.
Yeah, Klepto, who was on the show a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And so you know each other, and
yeah.
Awesome.
That's actually how we met. It was through cosplay, so...
Big community there.
Yeah, there's a bit of a community here, especially when you're a foreigner here, because there's not a whole lot of us who are here and also doing cosplay. So when you see each other, you're like...
Eye contact and like, don't leave me here alone. And
yeah,
nice.
You start meeting people. So.
And now 5 years later, still enjoying it. And what are you up to nowadays?
Nowadays, I'm studying. I'm studying my master's. I've just completed my thesis recently, so if you see the giant eye bags underneath, that is why.
All-nighters? Yeah.
Not too many of those, because I would die. But yeah, I'm actually not graduating until next spring, but I decided to get the thesis finished and all out of the way. So yeah, that's where I'm at now.
Yeah. Glad to hear that everything's going well and that this is done.
Yes.
And you came here today because you wanted to talk about your very special experience here in Japan.
Yeah.
And so you are transgender and identify as non-binary. Is that correct?
Yes. I'm non-binary.
So that means you have probably faced quite a lot of challenges here in Japan, right? It's a society with a lot of cultural norms where maybe the being transgender or being non-binary are things that may not be too well understood. Before we start all the discussions about this, could you maybe tell us about what are your definitions of a gender? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, so transgender is kind of just an umbrella term for somebody who doesn't identify with the same gender that they were assigned when they were born. So if you hear like assigned female at birth, assigned male at birth, but that person may not necessarily identify with being female or male. So non-binary is also kind of an umbrella term for anybody who's not man or woman. It's somewhere in between or neither.
Is it gender fluid the same? Or?
Gender fluid is underneath the umbrella. So like maybe somebody feels more feminine or masculine on certain days, or some days they feel more neutral, then they might identify as gender fluid, which it can be a type of non-binary, and it kind of depends on the person how they want to choose what labels to identify themselves with. So I use non-binary as the most general one because my gender is Shrug. I don't identify with being a man or a woman in particular. I'm just somewhere in between.
So the gender is an identification, right? So it's a personal choice, and the sex will be kind of what you're biologically born with initially, and that could be changed.
I think the way that we've looked at the terminology over the years has kind of changed, because there was kind of a time, maybe when I was younger, where you think of gender as what you're presenting as, and sex is what you really are or were born as. But for, I think, the majority of transgender people today, they see these terms as one and the same. It's all about who you are, and somebody who is... Like, I guess I've heard the argument sometimes that you need to know the sex for somebody's, for example, like medical treatments and that kind of thing. And there are maybe some differences depending on what kinds of hormones a person has. But, well, my personal take is that it isn't exactly anybody's business.
So it's a personal choice.
So it's not necessarily a choice, but sometimes it's just like the way that you are, you know, like a feeling. It's like, it's kind of hard for me to think of something to relate it to.
So for you personally, is there a specific moment in time where you noticed your feelings changing, or has it always been the feeling that this is not really who I am, I'm more like someone else? How was it for you to kind of realize this for yourself?
Yeah, so I kind of realized when I was in university and undergrad. I think my whole life I was trying really, really hard to be something. And I've always been kind of feeling like I have to be performative when I'm around other people in general.
Okay.
So because I was told ever since I was, born, oh, you're a girl, so you should act a girl, and these are the things that a girl does, and so you should be girl. And so, but I was never particularly fond of it, and I didn't always feel comfortable about it. So, I kind of started exploring things when it actually started when my sister got into cosplay.
Oh, okay.
So my sister got into cosplay, and she's older than me, so everything she did was the coolest thing in the world. And I was like, oh,
and naturally you want to do the same.
And then like the first time I started cosplaying, I was cosplaying like younger girl characters. Your first time you do a little Cardcaptor Sakura or something. I was like 13 or something, And then I learned about, when you cosplay, you can actually pretend to be another gender. You can pretend to be a boy. Whoa. And then so it kind of gave me a gateway to explore myself a little bit. And over time, I realized that these other ways of presenting myself and sort of made me feel a lot better about myself. I was like, wow, I look at myself and I kind of feel good about what I see.
See yourself smile in the mirror more, yeah?
Like freedom, liberating.
Yeah, my hair used to be like down almost to my like hips, and it was all wavy and whatever, and I would not try very hard to make it look good, but I used to try to be more feminine, and then eventually got to a point where I was like, this feels awful. I chopped all my hair off, and I was like, actually, I'm not this. I'm gonna try this other thing and figure out what makes me feel good about myself. So I eventually landed on this middle space, so to speak, and since then I've felt a lot more comfortable about myself, and
so a very positive change for you.
Yeah, it's nice. I mean, there are always some challenges, and there's always things that you kind of have to navigate once you realize, oh crap, I'm transgender. Oh no, now the state that I was born in really hates me and that kind of stuff.
Alabama is quite strict on transgender laws.
Oh wow, oh no, now I'm queer and in a conservative place. That's not gonna be very fun for me, but it's not like I can exactly go back and change and be like, well, I better try to fix this brain. It's not supposed to be this. But like the more you do that, the more miserable you can feel. So
Is this a process? I am making an assumption here. You also shared maybe with your sister, perhaps, and your parents. How was it within the family? Was it a positive change as well?
Yeah, well, I'm really fortunate that my family is quite open-minded. So I eventually came out to my parents, and I had been like, before I already kind of knew that I wasn't a heterosexual person. I wasn't straight. Exactly. I didn't exactly feel like I was gay or something, but I was like something else. So I'd been open with my parents and my family about that. Well, my immediate family about that before. And I talked to my sister and stuff about that before. So they'd already like put their toes in the waters a little bit. So when I started like coming out more and stuff, they wanted to understand me more than they wanted to try to uphold some sort of values that they were, like taught. So I'm really, really thankful that they put so much effort into learning and trying to be better to support me. And it's been pretty good. It's not a story that a lot of people get.
But it's wonderful to hear that. And I'm assuming this has really helped you kind of shape who you are today and make this jump into moving from Alabama all the way to the other side of the world together with your sister, even though you're separated Tokyo and Osaka, but you've clearly made a better choice here.
Obviously.
And so now you've made a gender transition before coming to Japan, is that correct?
So I guess I sort of socially transitioned, so to speak. I was like, my pronouns are they, them, and this is kind of how I want to start presenting myself and that kind of thing. I hadn't done any type of medical transitions before I came to Japan. I wasn't exactly planning on doing anything. Like, I don't really want to do hormones, at least at this point in my life. And when I first moved here, I had like thought about something like top surgery, where you have like the chest tissue removed so that it's flat. But I was like, maybe that's something for like a long ways in the future, but it hadn't been something that I was really thinking about before I moved here.
Okay. So when you, for example, one thing that I'm curious about is you mentioned you use the pronouns they, them. How is it then now when you come to Japan in a legal way, for example, on the passport? I'm not sure do they recognize they, them? Do you still have to use the previously assigned?
At this point, so I think the US has allowed for a gender X marker on your passport now.
Awesome.
I have not gone through with it because I am terrified to find out what Japan would do. Like they would be like, it can only be one or the other. What do I do with this other third thing? So I haven't actually gone through to try to find out about that because I'm a little scared.
You don't want to find out.
You don't want to find
I don't want to find out that, now I can't fill out any of my medical forms and I'm stuck in bureaucracy land. But I think I might try later on down the line because I'm actually getting married this year.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Oh.
So after I get married, I have to change my passport anyway with the new last names and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to have to go through with all that anyway. So I'm going to go do a big old Google search and see if anybody else has figured it out.
How is it done?
Yeah, exactly.
Topic you touched upon was, for example, the medical field. I assume like all of us, you regularly have to maybe have a checkup with the doctors, and there's always
more than usual, but it has nothing to do with my gender.
You have to fill out the usual paper form, and they always ask like your gender. You mentioned at the beginning when we started talking that perhaps in some situations there's actual need for them to know for certain medical procedures depending on whatever hormones you have in your body. If you've performed like a transformative surgery, that may affect things, I imagine, as well. How have you been navigating the medical field here in Japan?
Carefully. So when it comes to clinics and stuff, it's easier for me as a non-binary person and as someone who's not on hormones or anything. It's easier to not try to fight. I don't really care if my cardiologist thinks that I am one thing or the other. I just, at the end of the day, need to get a certain type of medical care from this person. So when it isn't relevant, then it is not a battle that I choose for myself. And the only times when it really is relevant is when it comes to like some area of medicine that is like specific to like your, you know, specific organs.
Yes.
So yeah, it's I guess, how should I put it?
Is there any difficulties communicating with the doctors, for example, at that moment? Is there a need to explain, or are they usually quite understanding of your choices and who you are as a person, and kind of being willing to make compromises on their side, perhaps?
Yeah. Well, most of the time it is, when it isn't relevant, it's not relevant. There's like, the only time that anything is really going to come up is like there's a question on the clinic sheet that you get every single time you have to go to a new doctor that's like, have you ever had a surgical procedure? And I will write, yeah, I've had a surgical procedure, and they never ask me anything about it. Yeah, it was more the process of getting to like the surgical procedure itself that was relevant to all of that. Otherwise, and part of it is linguistic, I think, because in Japanese you don't use pronouns for people very often. You usually just refer to them by name, or you just let the subject be implied. So it isn't exactly relevant for me to be bringing that up, really, because it's not like they're going to refer to me in some sort of like one way or the other. Fortunately, it's not relevant in a lot of places, because that can be an area where it's really uncomfortable, or you just have to like grin and bear it. And
a lot of pressure as well, perhaps, to before going, maybe deterring some people to go because they may be scared of facing those situations with doctors, plus language barriers, plus having to explain yourself over and over again. Yeah,
so I can imagine for someone who's like a transgender man or a transgender woman who doesn't have their identification card with the right gender marker on it, then they're probably going to have some more struggles, particularly if somebody is like doing any sort of like medical thing or hormonal thing. That's often something that you need to let a doctor know about. So, and because I haven't done that, I don't really know how the reactions tend to be, at least medically. In general, when I do talk to Japanese people about the fact that, oh, by the way, don't call me a josei, don't call me that, I'm somewhere in the middle, and they in Japan they have a term gender X.
So they have kind of also created a sort of
it's a pretty new term. But when you explain it to a person, in my experience, lots of people have been very understanding. Although I think part of it comes from the fact that I am a foreigner here in Japan, and I don't think that a Japanese person would necessarily be able to get away with it as easily as I can as a foreigner, because already people are like, well, you're from this faraway land with strange customs and strange behaviors, so it's just one more thing.
Like there's an understanding on a deeper level. By that I mean that they really understand all the implications, what it means for you, and how important that is. Or so then it's like a very superficial, okay, and you're some new, okay, fine, and no further questions asked.
Yeah, for sure. No.
Do you sometimes get people interested in trying to actually understand what it means?
I think I've had maybe a couple of people kind of ask about it. So actually, I mentioned earlier that I used to be a teacher here in Japan. And whenever my students graduated, I taught middle school for a year, and whenever my students graduated, I gave them the honor of being allowed to know my Instagram handle.
Okay, divulging very personal.
Well, my Instagram is actually a cosplay Instagram, and the students knew I was a cosplayer. I would like put photos in and be like, oh, wow,
that's you. That's really you. Can't believe it.
Chari sensei, cha. That kind of thing. But so for those who wanted to like still maybe see what I was up to, I was like, I'll open up the door. Like, you know, you're gonna be in high school. The stuff I put on my Instagram is fine for a high school student, whatever. So I've actually sometimes had a couple of students come back, and it isn't always about gender specifically, but I've had some students who will message me after a long time and be like, hey, I know that you know about some of this LGBT stuff, and can you actually kind of help me understand a little more, because I'm like dealing with this person and I think that maybe he might be asexual or something, and I just want to understand kind of what this person is feeling, what they're experiencing. So
has it ever happened, maybe one step further, that a student came to you and is like, I also think that I'm different and I don't know who to talk about with this, and how to talk about it, because perhaps they don't have words here in Japan to refer. Well, we mentioned that there's a new gender X here now, but maybe a lot of the vocabulary is missing, a lot of the deeper understanding of what it means, especially maybe psychologically, right? For a person to identify as a gender or no gender at all. And has it happened that students came to you, or maybe not students, but other people?
I've been waiting. I'm waiting just like for someone to come up about it. I haven't actually had anybody come up to me about it yet, but I'm just like, I know I've seen you. I know it's somewhere in there, and I know that you guys got my information from your senpais. You know that I was queer. I definitely did not look like your average lady or anything when I was a teacher. So it hasn't happened yet, but I did know that there were a couple of actually transgender students back when I was working as a teacher. So it's kind of a new thing, but they're starting to allow people to wear either uniform, because you know in Japan when you're in middle school, every middle school has uniforms, and you wear the skirt, the girls or the boys, and you wear the skirt. Or
started releasing gender neutral uniforms.
It's new here, which is crazy that that's such a new concept here, because they've been having, it's easier for everyone to just wear pants, but it's new and exciting here. So I would occasionally see a student, I'm like, you're wearing pants. You've had the conversation, haven't you? So I guess I always wanted to be like, have it be open and wear a little rainbow pin or something. Be like, I hope that someone will come talking to me. But I didn't actually get a whole lot of students who came up about it.
Back a little bit to the medical field, you mentioned, so you recognize some students that could be transgender or maybe are already have transitioned. Is doing a surgery here possible in Japan, considering all the obstacles to not all the official paperwork? Is it actually possible if you want to in Japan to do the surgery?
So actually there's a big old problem here in Japan, in my opinion. Actually, if you want to legally change your gender in Japan, you have to have gender reassignment surgery. It is not an option to just be like, I am this other gender, and then it's done, which is...
So they kind of still associate it very much with the actual physical side of things. They very much associate it with this type of body part means man or woman. And that is a whole other thing, because you can consider intersex people who 2% of the population are born as some type of intersex. So that's a big percentage.
Yeah, that's the same number as people who have green eyes like me. So a very large percentage of people are born intersex, but they're still kind of assigned some sort of gender at birth based on what somebody can see, you know. But it doesn't change the fact that maybe not necessarily everybody has what organs you're going to expect with male or female, right? So there's already the big old intersex issue here. So on top of that, surgery is like a huge deal, and lots of people who decide that they're transgender and identify as like some other gender from what they were born as don't want to go through with the surgery.
It's a big step to take.
Yeah, it's a big step. Not everybody even wants it. It's like, if they're still comfortable in their body, then why should they have to do any kind of surgery to look a different way? And one part of the requirements and the surgical requirements here in Japan for changing your gender legally is sterilization.
Okay.
So,
can you walk
yeah.
us through this? What does it mean?
So sterilization means that you cannot have children anymore. There's no way that you would be able to reproduce anymore. And it even extends to that if you have had a child within the past 20 years, you are not allowed to legally transition. So isn't that strange? I'm like, that sounds a little... I'm not really sure what the logic is behind it.
I was reading up on that, and officially it's to avoid confusion with your children. So children were referring to you as like mother or father, and now you are this different person, and they don't want to confuse children.
It's always for the children. They use children as a cop-out for anything.
So that's why there is 20-year cap. So if they're more than 20, it's
adult.
okay.
Now they know.
They're old enough.
Yeah, of course, because like nobody who's 15 can understand that kind of thing. Even 15, like
they might be also transgender.
Yeah, right. And you some people know as soon as when they're like 5 or something, right? But yeah, it's an excuse, but I don't think it's a very valid one. And
so if you want to do the surgery, you need to go through the steps of sterilization.
Yes. Yeah, and it's a long process up to that. You have to be on hormone therapy for several years before. That's usually a requirement for any kind of surgical thing, for particularly for what we call bottom surgery. Which, by the way, for a transgender person, never ask them if they've had the surgery. That's just really rude. Like,
good to know.
You can't just go up to someone and be like, so, do you still have a, like, you wouldn't go up to any normal person. You wouldn't go up to any person in general and ask that question. So clearly you shouldn't be asking that to a transgender person, right? So, yeah, it's a very long process. And for example, here in Japan, gay marriage is still not legal.
Yes.
They have partnerships, but they're not actually legally binding in any way. It's more of a piece of paper that's like, in Osaka, we have seen that you're gay.
We acknowledge you are good.
But
good
it's
for
still,
you.
Right. It's up to an institution to decide whether or not you are able to, for example, take out a loan together.
You mentioned you're getting married this year.
Yeah, I'm getting married this year.
In Japan?
No, absolutely not. No,
not possible, right?
No. I'm actually going back to Alabama to get married, which is crazy. Like, wow, Alabama's going to let me get gay married, but Japan won't. Really?
So if you want to basically have a gender transition in Japan, and let's say officially plus surgery, it is possible, but you have to prepare for many, many years of obstacles to go through, and you will also have to make sacrifices, and perhaps will not be able to, how can I phrase this, be exactly who you want to be, right? Because you may want to change your gender, but you may not want to change physically, and you'll have to either sacrifice one or the other.
Yeah, exactly.
Or deal with, okay, I changed gender in my mind, I identify differently, but on paper and everywhere else, I'm still going to be officially. So possible. Do you feel like it's changing here in Japan generally? Not necessarily only the surgery part, but this recognition of the LGBTQ community and more particularly transgender.
I think that they're finally on the train tracks at all. They were not even anywhere near it for a long time, but I think that especially with a couple of the LGBT cases that have happened in like the I don't remember if it hit the Supreme Court, but in local courts and stuff, and they were kind of climbing the ranks. It's caught people's attention, and according to survey data, the majority of people are, for example, supportive of having LGBT marriage, that type of thing.
Which is positive. It means the majority of people around you are kind of supportive.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a positive journey here, me getting ready to get married, and honestly, people have been really nice to me about it here, even though it's not what they would necessarily expect. But I guess going back to the transgender issue, it can be really troublesome for people who, for example, if somebody is a transgender woman, so they were assigned male at birth, but now she identifies as a woman and are, say, dating another woman who was assigned female at birth, and she's a cisgender woman. They can only get married now as long as the transgender woman never fully transitions and never fully has her gender legally recognized. And they can't have children together if she ever wants to transition. Or she would have to wait so many years for her to be able to transition.
That's
and
a lot
also
of
have children.
sacrifices.
Yeah. So it can be really difficult for people like that. Or another way, if for example, like a transgender man and a woman are dating, but they both are female on all of their identification, they can't get married right now. And if they ever want to get married, then the transgender man has to fully transition and has to go through with sterilization or
so then they cannot
like
get
that.
children
So
unless they maybe adopt.
yeah, he could never have children. Or maybe like the person that he's marrying could still, but then there would be a lot of issues because the custody rights in Japan are a little complicated as well. So it can just be very, very difficult for a lot of transgender people, especially when it gets tied into this lack of recognition for LGBT and that kind of thing.
Is there maybe some activist groups or some activism in general trying to push the government to be more proactive into making the environment for the LGBTQ community more welcoming, more comfortable, and more basically equal to everyone else?
Yeah, there's a couple of LGBT sort of activism groups and just general groups. A big one is Stonewall Japan, Stonewall Kansai. And they're involved with Rainbow, which Rainbow Parade is basically Japan's pride, that kind of thing. So Rainbow and Stonewall are two of the bigger ones that I'm aware of, at least. So like there are some groups, and of course there's, just because it isn't recognized doesn't mean that the population doesn't exist. So there's an LGBT population that's advocating for itself, and that kind of stuff.
They have been hiding more underground in their own smaller communities and not be able to express themselves to the extent they would have liked to. Right?
In some cases, it's possible.
But it's changing a little bit on the social side. If we disregard the government, the communities are becoming more active, and people are more expressive.
Little by little, I think that it's coming more to the forefront, which is always good to see. But I don't know if my marriage is ever going to get recognized as long as I'm here, you know? Yeah. So it's
well, we never know. The generation might change. There might be a turnover.
Yeah, well, if I'm around for another 10 years, then maybe by then I'll be able to be...
Besides, for example, some of the obstacles you just mentioned of having your marriage recognized or the legal recognition, what are some of the challenges you face here in Japan as a transgender person?
Maybe cultural or like, again, understanding by people that they do not understand or maybe oppose you.
I haven't seen a lot of opposition necessarily, but I think that the understanding is fundamentally just really different. So I guess one example is there's a type of comedy called gay,
okay,
as in gay, where a man will pretend to be a flamboyant transgender woman and do silly things that are very womanly, and it's funny because he's really a man. That's what I'm told. That's
is this an older type of comedy, or is this a new genre?
It's an older type, and it hasn't fully died out yet. So that's just kind of one sort of example. If you ever have seen I guess it's a stereotype that comes up in anime sometimes. There would be like a character with a really deep manly voice and curly black hair and bright red lipstick. And that's the like Okama caricature, which is offensive.
So there's still a lot of kind of stereotypes that persist and that are used in popular culture and basically shaping also the image of the LGBTQ community in a negative way for the younger generation.
It's just not necessarily humanizing, you know, like there may be like some queer characters or something somewhere, but it isn't really portrayed in a way where an actual queer person can see themselves in it, right?
Do you feel like this is done intentionally, or is this rather just done out of pure ignorance and their own personal stereotypes of the community?
I think that it mostly comes down to ignorance and just a lack of understanding about that kind of thing. So
are there perhaps educational groups that are trying to kind of engage into these open discussions with people, with communities?
I have no idea.
I
have no idea.
It's difficult to change people's minds when they have been kind of taught and told for so many years and generations, especially the Japanese population being quite old. And then you see the discussion starts a little bit about the LGBTQ community, and suddenly you have, like, I don't know if you saw this going on, I think last month it was, or 2 months ago. In Tokyo, they opened these gender neutral toilets.
Oh, I didn't know.
And it was kind of a publicity stunt, like, oh, I think it's at some big station. Oh, we have gender neutral toilets, go wherever you want. And without a real understanding, because shortly after, what you saw on the internet was just a bunch of guys waiting there for, I guess, women to come in, and not really understanding the whole concept of what this was for.
Yeah, typical. Typical Japan.
So for yourself personally, and kind of dealing with those challenges and overcoming the obstacles, how have you built yourself a support system in Japan? Do you have also perhaps maybe some role models that you're able to look up to? We talked before about the younger Japanese people not necessarily having anyone to go talk to. How was it for you here in Japan?
Well, I managed to find just enough people, really. I mean, I've mentioned that I'm getting married, so my partner has been like everything in the journey, you know.
Most supportive person.
Yeah. My partner is also non-binary, so we've kind of been there for each other. My partner's another foreigner from Italy.
Okay.
Yeah, so originally Italian is a language that doesn't have neutrals.
Yes.
So I think similarly to Japan, where like it's almost like two opposite sides of the same coin. In Japan here, you have like no sort of gendered language, but there's a lot of gendered expectations. In Italy, there's only gendered language and like a complete lack of understanding of anything in between as well. So
confusion all around.
Yeah, so them being a non-binary person had to do with kind of learning about other options from other places, and then it was kind of a journey getting to the point where like realizing the way that you want to be referred to and stuff. So I guess being able to be with my person, you know, along the way has been really, really helpful. I can't remember if I mentioned that my sister lives in Tokyo.
Yes.
Yeah, I did. It was at the very beginning, like one of the first things I said. But yeah, my sister's always been really supportive. My sister knows other people who are LGBT. Her best friend is a bisexual woman who's married to another woman. And so there's just a lot of, you have to kind of keep your eyes open for it, but you can like pinpoint and find your people who are understanding. It can sometimes be difficult with Japanese people.
Do you notice a difference with them?
Yeah, I think it's partially because of the cultural understandings of gender in general. So I guess with Japanese people, I think if they've kind of been exposed to more Western culture, if they've done a study abroad, if they've kind of made a lot of friends on the internet or something, if they're always on English Twitter or something like that, then they tend to kind of have a more open-minded mindset. Open mindset is what I want. Open mindset is what I was going for.
Welcome to new ideas.
Yeah. So they for those people that I've been able to meet and befriend, they get it more. And so yeah, it's a little bit difficult because in general, I think the way that people understand gender is really tied to your culture, and so coming in with a Western idea of gender and my own gender journey coming to Japan, I can't expect Japan to get it. And I can't be like upset about them not having like the terminology or the words to understand my experience. It's kind of like, I would appreciate if more people can learn about it, but at the same time, I have to exercise patience a lot. And so
yeah, the one thing we can hope for, I think, is that more people show more understanding, right? And just at least engage in the discussion. Would there be for you personally any wishes? Like if you could wish for any change in the next 5 years here in Japan, what would be some of the maybe most important things that or biggest priorities that you would say are necessary to make life more normal, so to say?
Well, they've got to change the clinic intake forms. Like
remove the
instead of an M or instead of the Jo or the Dan, just write it yourself. I don't know. Like,
can you put two check marks or like circle both
circle,
of them?
or circle the middle.
Yeah.
Circle
both of them.
Circle
like
the slash in between. Something
them.
like that. And I think a lot of talking about more LGBT and starting with this issue of marriage, because that's one that kind of everybody can understand and agree on. And that's like your little gateway, that's your foot in the door. And once you've started on figuring out, okay, let's decide that gay people can be married, then it's like, oh, maybe we should also decide that trans people are people. It's a little staircase, right?
Yeah.
So I think starting there is like the best step to take, and then it's going to open a lot more doors once that's kind of mainstreamed.
And I have one maybe last question before we wrap up a little bit our discussion. But if you would have, you would give maybe some advice to people in Japan feeling like they want to change or in transition or have already transitioned but maybe struggling, finding a foothold here, what kind of advice would you give them?
I think I would say start with the Kansai Queer Film Festival.
Okay.
You're going to find a few people over there. That's one kind of gateway. It's a yearly activity. There's a lot of different queer people, also disabled people, who come together and enjoy films. And that's one little spot to kind of see, oh wow, I can see myself in this media, first of all, and oh wow, I'm seeing all these different people who maybe feel kind of like me. Just looking out for that kind of community and finding your spot within the things that interest you is really, really important. And I think that's my biggest
finding
advice.
people, finding your community.
Yeah, find your circle.
Yes.
Your biggest fans, and don't put up with people who are going to try to make you into something else. You know, I think a lot of people are afraid to stand up for themselves here, and there's a really, really strong sense of wanting to not stick out, because you know the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. Right? But even if you're kind of sticking out, there's like a different board where all of the nails are sticking out, and you can just go to the other board, and you're not gonna be like sticking out too far anymore. So,
is there anything for you that you feel like you would have liked to share today that I maybe didn't ask you about, and that you think is important to discuss?
Well, so we talked a little bit about medical stuff, but I didn't get too much into my own like medical transition, so to speak, because I said I'm not messing with any of the hormones or any of that. That's not for me. But I did have a surgery here in Japan.
Okay. Can you tell us a bit more about this?
Yeah, so I had top surgery. You'll notice that I'm very flat. not wearing a binder or anything to make it that way. I went through the horrifying process of all of it. Surgery sucks, especially in Japan. They don't do morphine here.
They don't do morphine at all.
Wow.
It's really rare, and it's not going to be for that kind of procedure. So I think
a lot of pain.
Oh yeah, it sucked. But one of the things about leading up to it was very interesting. So the majority of the time, if somebody is trying to fully medically transition or something, you usually have to go through an institution. You have to start by giving interviews with psychologists and start doing hormone therapy for a year or two before you can do anything like some kind of top surgery, which is something that a lot of people start with because, you know, your chest is something that's more visible.
Yes.
It's kind of a visible way to present how your gender and your identification. So even to do that, though, the official way requires a really long lead up and all that kind of stuff. And I was at a point where I did not want to wait anymore. So
Yeah. It's like I have to do this now.
Yeah.
Or I want to do this now.
Yeah. And it was kind of a have to because it started with a bit of a medical spooky situation. My parents hadn't been particularly like all for the idea of top surgery before. And then it was like one December a few years ago when I was feeling my chest and there was a little lump. And I was like, that's scary, because if you ever have, this goes for anybody, regardless of gender, if you are ever like feeling your chest and you feel something abnormal about it, go get it checked out.
Quickly.
Yes. Anybody, men, women, in between, can have breast cancer or other kinds of things. Always get it checked out. So I went to go get it checked out. It was terrifying. I had to do, as I lovingly refer to, the panini press.
The panini press.
The panini press.
Lovely name for a procedure.
Very painful. And so the doctor saw that there was something there and was like, we need to do a biopsy and see if it's something to worry about or not, because it was not obviously just like, you have a little cyst, it's okay, we can drain it, whatever. It was not that. It looked a little weird.
Something's off.
Yeah. So I got a biopsy done. It was my first time having anything like that. It was terrifying. And when I went back a week later, awesome that you can get your results in a week. That's not a thing in America. But I went back a week later.
Well, it's good to have for something so important.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You don't want to wait months.
So my results were inconclusive, but it meant that currently it does not seem that I have, terminal cancer or anything. That's great. I love not having terminal cancer.
Who doesn't?
Yeah, we all do. But because it was inconclusive, it was like, we don't know right now if it's going to turn bad. So you can wait for a while, or we can just have it removed. We can wait and see if something happens. And
then you were like, let's do both at once.
Well, I said, let's wait for a bit.
Okay.
Because I wanted to kind of ease into this idea. And I had no idea where to go if I wanted to go through with some kind of surgery thing. So I waited a few months. I went back. Nothing had really changed, but ultimately my doctor was like, you should really get this out to make sure that nothing bad happens in the future. And I was like, well, actually, doc, what if I had it all out? What if we just took it all away? And at that point, she was like, oh, you mean like, and we started having this conversation where she's realizing, oh, you are a transgender person. And then suddenly they were referring to me as the Japanese he. And I was like, okay, well, there's nothing in between, but whatever. Sure, thank you.
That was a quick switch.
All right. But I really appreciated that they were very quick to be like, oh, so there's this. So I asked about other clinics or places I could go to and got some suggestions. So basically I found a place that was not the whole like, you have to go through several years of transitioning to whatever and get your stuff done. You just go to this place. Are you free tonight
at 5?
Yeah, hop over. So there was a bit of a process. So I went there, I had a consultation, and I had to get 2 psychologists to sign off for me.
Wow.
For me to be able to get this. Which is like, why? I was literally at it. Basically, it's a plastic surgeon who specialized in reconstructive surgeries for people who have cancer, and also started doing top surgeries for transgender folks and like that. So I have to go and still do a consultation, though, for some reason, for the doctor to be allowed to do the procedure for me, even though I clearly want it. But okay. But the thing is, so I've talked about I'm non-binary, but Japan doesn't really have an understanding of what non-binary is. And it was pretty clear to me from the questionnaire that I had to do ahead of time that
you have to pick something.
Yeah, it wasn't really that. So I basically just had to go in and pretend I was a boy, but only a little bit. So I was like, because I was like, I can't bring myself to fully lie to a doctor, but they're gonna be asking me questions and they want me to answer. I feel this way because I'm a man, and I'm not a man. I'm something else that you guys don't understand. But okay, so it was a little bit uncomfortable. I did have my partner come with me, and my partner actually like dressed kind of womanly to make it look like we were a straight couple. Like, I'm a man who wants to be with my girlfriend or something. But it kind of gave me like credibility points or something. So it was a little funny.
Tricking the doctors.
So at the end of my first appointment, my doctor says this all had to be done in Japanese also. Yes, there are translation services available for people who need help and cannot go through the whole process in Japanese. But
good to know.
I have pretty good Japanese, and I've been to lots of doctors over the years, so I was okay with having the conversations or whatever. So at the end, the psychologist turns to me and says in Japanese, "So you may not know it yet, but I think there's a boy inside of you." And I was like, "Oh, he's in there."
Oh.
He's there. Well, thank you. And he signed off for my surgery.
And then you go back to the clinic.
Yeah. So the second guy, of course, once you have the first one, say yes. The second one is just there to verify and was just like, check. Okay, you're good. Pretty much. So it wasn't too hard after the first one, but it was frankly hysterical to have
makes for
that
a good
told
story.
If you
can take it with a little bit of humor, it makes for a good story.
It was the funniest thing anyone has ever said to me in my life.
You may
not know it yet. That was the part.
And the doctor was not joking. It was
he was not.
Full
he
on
was
serious.
Fully serious.
Wow.
You may not know, but I think
maybe.
But I know.
There's a boy inside of you. I was like, I was like, oh, okay, I don't know.
Once you have all of this verified, the other doctors will approve, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So it wasn't so hard, and I didn't have any very funny moments for my second psychologist appointment.
Check.
But it was then a lot easier, but and then recovery sucked so bad.
So then you do the surgery and you don't have the morphine, and then you just have to wait for the pain to go away.
Yeah.
How long does that take for the pain?
Oh God, ages. And so the way that they did it for me, which is not what they do in the West usually, is I was given, because they don't use morphine, so I was given an epidural. So they gave like a nerve block in the spine. And it makes your whole, like here and down to your arms and your fingers, totally numb, and you can't move. Which is better than pain, but it didn't always like block all of it, So, and then afterwards, I actually had a complication where the epidural had kind of irritated my nerve ending, so my whole arm was just like tingling, burning sensation. I couldn't really use my hand for like a month, and it was great because I was just starting grad school.
Can't take any
and
notes.
I'm like, I can't write, I can't really type very well. It took a while for it, and I would just like wear a compression sleeve and all braces and stuff. So that was an uncommon complication that I got to endure. And then usually when you get that kind of surgery, it's not uncommon for you to need some kind of revisionary stuff afterwards, because once everything settles and the inflammation and swelling goes down, which the swelling was awful. There's so much fluid that gets in there. Oh, not fun.
I can imagine.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Normally in the West, you have like some kind of medical drain that helps it get out. They didn't do that for me except for like one day. So I just got drained in the office, which was bizarre. And I hate needles, so I was dying. But other than that, so I had to get a revisionary surgery. And I don't know where the failure of communication happened, but there was a failure of communication where I thought, surely, because I'm going to be sliced open, that I will be asleep for this surgical procedure, right?
You'd
Would
assume
you
so.
think that if you're having surgery on your chest, you know, where your arms can move around, all that kind of stuff, wouldn't you think that maybe you would be asleep for it?
You'd hope to be asleep.
And I was not. And I didn't realize it until I was laying down on the operating table and realizing they had never given me an IV. And I was like, oh. So that
Close your eyes.
not
Close your eyes.
that was not communicated well enough for me to get it. And maybe I was making assumptions, but why? I don't know. I don't know if it's something that's normally done awake in other places. I don't know if it's a Japan thing. Japan hates to use like medications and drugs or anything on anybody at any point. So it was horrifying, frankly. a little bit of medical trauma
What an
for
experience,
the end.
yeah. It
But
doesn't
once
make you
I
want to
was-
go back.
Oh yeah. But after that one was done, I was done. I'm done forever. I've decided
Yeah.
I'm happy enough and I never want to do anything
I'm
again.
glad you are. Yeah.
So-
what an
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
So, to
A little spooky.
Yeah, to anyone who's considering, just prepare, be aware of what
Yes.
could happen, and well, thank you very much for sharing
Yeah.
that extra story. I'm glad I asked, because this was really also insightful into what happens in the communications and the steps.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for your time and answering all our questions, for showing also the people who are transgender in Japan that they are people that they can talk to, that there are communities to go to. A beautiful film festival in Kansai.
Yeah.
Go there.
Go there. It's so fun.
Enjoy. Before we wrap up, Henry prepared a few questions for us.
Yes,
Oh, boy.
we have
It's
the
our trivia time.
Oh my
Trivia
gosh.
time. So
Don't worry, I'm very bad at it.
Oh, well,
it's
I'm
really
about
bad.
about to give you a run for your money. Oh no!
There
Oh,
you
it
go.
requires
So
writing.
yeah,
Oh,
how
it
we
was
do
spooky.
this,
Okay.
the answer to these three questions, we have three questions, is a number, be it like a year or amount of money or something like that, or percentage.
Oh,
So the
no.
closer you get, the better it is. Kind of a
no.
winner
Okay.
who get the closest to that number.
Okay.
All right, question one.
Okay, question number one.
Okay.
When did WHO, World Health Organization, announced that they are removing the transgenderism, as it was defined, gender identity disorder, from the list of mental illnesses?
Oh, man.
WHO, so it's international question, not about
Okay,
Japan.
so I'm writing it down and
Yeah,
waiting.
and then we
Yeah, and
say-
then we compare, so
Okay,
not
okay.
to kind of give hints
All
to
right.
each other.
I want my answer.
Okay.
And Chari, you go first, please.
I think, and I might be a little early, but I think it was 2004.
2004.
I
Okay.
have 2010.
2010. Actually, it was 2018
Oh, 18!
Oh
Yes.
my god,
Wow.
really?
that they announced it, and
So that's like
Oh.
super recent.
yes, very,
Wow.
very recent.
I had no idea it was that recent. It must have been different from
Yeah.
some of the places.
It was a little
Yeah.
bit different, probably. Like in the US, it was 2004, I think.
That's why I got it. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so
It was-
US was
okay,
a precursor.
Yes,
I
yes,
was
yes.
thinking about.
Alright.
I was
So it
somehow
was
the
very
US was
recently,
ahead.
and
Oh, wow.
and the plan was to implement it on the international scale by 2022, so just last year.
Which should have happened, but
Yeah.
yet I
So
had to
in-
get a gender identity disorder diagnosis for me to get surgery.
Yeah.
So.
So it's a mental
Glad you
disorder. in
healed
many
from
Yeah,
that.
countries.
yeah, I'm
Quotes.
healing from my mental disorder now.
All right, question number
Great.
2.
All right.
How many people identify as transgender in the US, according to several studies in 2022 and 2023? Let's
In
say,
the US, so we're not talking about
Is
Japan.
it a
US.
number of people or a percentage?
let's talk about absolute number of
oh
people.
no.
Well, I'm
Oh,
gonna say.
no.
A percentage is easier.
I
for
don't
you?
know if it's easier actually.
Well, if it's a percentage, we just have to do the math, right? 320 something million in the US, right?
Yeah.
Something like that, I would say. So my answer is going to be
I have absolute number.
I have an
Okay.
absolute number as
Percentage.
well. In my,
Okay.
Please, Chari.
There's 300 million people in the US, right?
A little bit more, yeah.
I'm gonna I wrote 3, but I'm gonna say 4 million.
Okay.
And I have 12 million. I don't know. I
12
was very
million.
optimistic.
Okay. There are several studies, and they range from 1.4 to 1.6 million.
Okay.
1.4 to
Okay,
1.6.
you're much closer than me.
Yeah, I think it's higher than that. That's just the census. They just
Probably,
don't
yeah.
know.
It's just, yeah. Yes,
And
yes.
one
According
last
to a study.
question for our trivia.
This is about Japan. When was the law allowing people in Japan, Japanese people, to legally change their gender? When
this
was
one.
the law passed in Japan? So they can legally change to another gender. They couldn't before.
I have no idea. I'm gonna put this.
I don't remember.
Okay, Chari,
I said 2015.
2015?
I say 2020.
2020. That was in 2003/4.
What?
Well, I should have went with my first
Yeah.
answer.
It's always like that, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Thank you for the cool, fun facts.
Oh, nice.
Thank you again, Chari, for coming. This was really interesting. I learned a lot, and I'm sure we have plenty more we could talk about. So if you ever want to come back, we'd be happy to have you here.
Yeah.
This was today's episode of Fish and Rice, Stories from Japan. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions on the topic, please ask all your questions down in the comments, and we will be happy to have Chari back to answer them. Thank you very much. See you next week. Bye.